Right now, you are sitting in a chair, or lying in a bed, or standing on a train, holding a glowing rectangle of glass and metal, reading words generated by a machine. And you think this is normal. You think this is what humans do. But underneath the clothes, underneath the language, underneath every system you have built to convince yourself otherwise, something ancient is running. Something that has never once updated its software. Something that still believes you are a mammal on a savanna, scanning for threats, hoarding calories, desperately seeking a tribe. What if you never stopped being an animal? Not as an insult, not as a metaphor, as a biological fact. Because here is what science is increasingly, uncomfortably revealing. The gap between you and every other creature on this planet is far, far smaller than you have ever been told. Start with your brain. You have been taught to think of it as an advanced organ, a thinking machine, a rational processor, the thing that makes you different. But neuroscientist Paul MacLean spent decades mapping what he called the triune brain. His model identified three distinct layers stacked inside your skull. The newest layer, the neocortex, handles language, planning, abstract thought. That is the part you identify as you. But beneath it sits the limbic system, which you share with every mammal alive. And beneath that sits the brainstem, a structure so ancient it predates the dinosaurs, regulating your heartbeat, your breathing, your instinct to freeze when something moves in your peripheral vision. You do not decide to freeze. It happens before you think. That is not your neocortex talking. That is a reflex older than the first flower that ever bloomed on Earth. And the older layers do not wait politely for the newer ones to weigh in. When your body perceives a threat, a sudden sound, a shadow, a stranger moving too fast, your amygdala fires before your rational mind has even begun to form a sentence. Psychologist Joseph LeDoux called this the low road, a shortcut, a circuit that bypasses conscious thought entirely and sends your body into survival mode in under 80 milliseconds. Your heart rate spikes, your pupils dilate, your muscles load with blood. You are a rational being who cannot stop panicking at a spider. Think about what you eat. Billions of dollars have been spent trying to convince you to choose vegetables over sugar, whole grains over processed fat. Most of it has failed. Not because you are lazy, because your ancient brain evolved in a world where calories were scarce and sweet things meant energy and salty things meant electrolytes and fat meant survival through the next winter. Every craving you feel is not weakness. It is a survival algorithm that worked perfectly for 200,000 years. The problem is, the algorithm has not been told the supermarket exists. Psychologist Kelly Brownell coined the term toxic food environment to describe what happens when an ancient appetite system collides with unlimited access to engineered, hyperpalatable foods. Your body is not broken. It is doing exactly what it was built to do. And the world you built does not match the world it was built for. Now think about status. Think about how you feel when you get a promotion, or win an argument, or post something that goes viral. There is a specific physical sensation, a warmth, a loosening in the chest, elevated mood. That is serotonin, the same neurochemical that determines dominance hierarchies in lobsters. Neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky has spent his career studying stress hormones in baboons. What he found translates almost perfectly to humans. In hierarchical primate groups, low-status individuals show chronically elevated cortisol levels, high blood pressure, suppressed immune function, shortened life expectancy. Sound familiar? Research on human populations shows near-identical patterns. Where you sit in the perceived social order directly shapes your biology. Your body is running a status program that has not changed since your ancestors were competing for access to food and mates on an open plain. You do not want the corner office because of the money. You want it because your nervous system is still counting dominance signals. Now think about loneliness, because this one matters more than almost anything else. When you are isolated, when you go too long without meaningful human contact, your brain does not register it as an inconvenience. It registers it as a threat. Researcher John Cacioppo spent decades studying what loneliness does to the human body. The findings are striking. Loneliness triggers the same stress response as physical pain. It dysregulates sleep. It raises inflammation markers. It shortens life by a measurable margin, comparable in some studies to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Why would being alone feel like dying? Because for most of human history, it was dying. A human separated from the group did not survive long. Banishment was execution. Your brain learned this lesson over hundreds of thousands of years. It baked the lesson into your architecture so deeply that even in a world where you can order food and pay bills and live entirely alone, your nervous system still reads social isolation as a mortal emergency. You are not lonely because something is wrong with you. You are lonely because something ancient inside you is doing its job. This is the paradox you live in every single day. You build systems of logic and law and medicine and art. You send telescopes into deep space. You compose symphonies and write constitutions and conduct clinical trials. And then you go home and you overeat and you scroll through photos of people you barely know, comparing your life to theirs, your status to theirs, feeling a bone-deep ache that no amount of achievement can fully touch. Because the part of you doing all of that comparing, all of that craving, all of that aching is ancient. Pre-language, pre-agriculture, pre-everything. Primatologist Franz de Waal spent decades studying bonobos and chimpanzees and found something that disturbed a lot of people who wanted humans to be exceptional. Empathy, fairness, altruism, conflict resolution, consolation after distress. None of these are uniquely human. They exist in our closest relatives in sophisticated, unmistakable forms. A chimpanzee that sees another in pain will move toward it, touch it, sit with it. Not because it was taught, because the mammalian nervous system is wired to register another creature's suffering as relevant information. You did not invent compassion. You inherited it. And you did not invent fear of death, or love of beauty, or the urge to tell stories around a fire, or the need to be seen and known by another person. These things were shaped by pressures that operated across millions of years, long before any human ever asked what it means to be human. Here is what this means for you. Right now, today. It means that every time you feel an emotion you cannot justify, an anxiety you cannot explain, a craving you cannot rationalize, you are not broken. You are not weak. You are not failing to be sufficiently modern. You are receiving a signal from a system that is millions of years old, doing its best to protect something that matters to it. Your body does not know about mortgages. It knows about predators. Your body does not know about social media. It knows about tribal belonging. Your body does not know about grocery stores. It knows about scarcity. The friction you feel between what you know you should do and what you want to do, between the rational plan and the emotional pull, that is not a character flaw. That is the gap between a prehistoric nervous system and a 21st century world. A gap that no amount of willpower alone can permanently close, because willpower is a thin strip of new cortex trying to argue with something that predates consciousness itself. Knowing this does not solve anything, but it changes something. When you understand that the anxiety is a false alarm from an ancient threat detection system, you can observe it differently. When you understand that the craving is a survival algorithm running in a world it was never designed for, you can respond to it differently. When you understand that the loneliness is your body correctly identifying that human connection is not optional, it is biological infrastructure, you can stop treating it as a weakness to push through and start treating it as a need to meet. You are not a rational being who sometimes acts irrationally. You are a mammal who has built extraordinary tools for reasoning, and those tools sit on top of, not in replacement of, something far older and far louder. The next time you feel the pull of something you cannot explain, the urge to check your phone for approval, or the spike of fear at a harmless sound, or the hollow ache of a quiet Sunday afternoon, pause for 1 second. Notice what is underneath it. Something ancient, something alive, something that has been running this whole time, doing its best, in a world it was never built for. You built the chair you are sitting in. You built the city outside your window. You built the language you are using right now to think about all of this. But you are still, after all of it, an animal trying to survive. And maybe that is not the problem. Maybe that is the whole point.